I think I became aware of the Atari Lynx when I was about 8 years old, and instantly I knew it was the future. The Game Boy looked absolutely pitiful in comparison, even the Game Gear did. This was a handheld seemingly with the power of a 16-bit console, and surely there was no stopping it. But time told a different tale. Nintendo Game Boy soldiered on, whilst Atari's Lynx became a distant memory, and for the life of me, I couldn't understand why. Welcome then to the Atari Lynx story, where we'll unravel exactly what happened and why.
Like so many of these stories, we're starting at Amiga Incorporated, before it was purchased by Commodore. Hi-Toro Incorporated, as it was known, was co-founded in 1982 by David Shannon Morse, later becoming Amiga Incorporated and leading to the Commodore Amiga 1000 in 1985. However, Morse would take a job at Epyx, finding himself on the board of directors from January 1987 onwards. Epyx Computer Software, a game developer founded in 1978 and operating out of San Francisco, had started on the Commodore PET. They quickly expanded to other systems. In 1987, Gilbert Freeman was the president of Epyx, and he'd been keenly watching the Amiga grow from what started as a shoestring operation into a swerve away from Atari and finally into the Commodore system it now was. Freeman was so impressed by Morse that he was quickly promoted to CEO in May 1987. This was the same month that Epyx held their California Games Cookout. Having already had success with Summer Games, Winter Games and World Games, they were looking to capture a vibe that was prevalent at the time, and what better way than to release California Games. The Cookout was a celebration of this, hosted near Epyx's offices, and came complete with a full-scale barbecue, beachwear, frisbees, hacky sack, a professional BMX freestyler and a pro skateboarder. Epyx were at the height of their powers, but they were now looking beyond their Commodore 64 success and onto their own system. This is one of the reasons why Morse was promoted to CEO. He had pitched the idea of a handheld console to Freeman, which in turn had been pitched to Morse by his son. Freeman was utterly sold by the idea.
When it comes to the Lynx, battery life is key. You can even get a proto power bank for it, which required 6 D-cell batteries to operate. This thing alone weighed a ton. And sure, batteries are better now, but charging can still be a hit and miss situation. So, I'd like to thank CukTech for sponsoring this segment.
Right, here's my literal desk before CukTech. Charging cables everywhere, me attempting to charge everything from whatever spare USB socket I could muster, half the time with things not even charging fast enough. Let's see if we can sort this out. Now, as soon as you get this thing out of the box, it feels weighty, solid, dependable. It's also got a DC socket for your laptop along with a load of converters so it fits your particular laptop. Pop it in the included stand and the idea is we have a power station on demand. That 1.83-inch screen does more than tell you the wattage being drawn. If I connect up my phone, tablet, camera batteries, microphone and laptop, you can see it gives a breakdown of each item being charged along with the operating temperature. Pretty cool. Also, it supports ADC2 multi-protocol. We've got some very fast charging and it will give your laptop up to 300 watts if it needs it. That's very useful for those using their laptop for serious tasks. My laptop peaks at about 145 watts, but if you've got a proper gaming laptop, it will draw all that it needs to. This is honestly a very welcome sponsor. Being able to not have my laptop brick trailing across the desk, being able to have everything neat, and the reassurance that you can see exactly what rate things are charging is glorious, and also lets you identify problems like shoddy cables. If this appeals to you, check out my link in the description. I think it might be time to get a USB mod for my Lynx. From his Amiga days, Morse already knew exactly who he needed to recruit to flesh out this idea, and arranged a lunch with RJ Michael and Dave Needle, 2 ex-Amiga employees famous for working on the Amiga. RJ Michael was a software guy who built the Amiga Intuition UI, and Needle hardware, who was instrumental alongside Jay Miner in completing the Amiga's Agnes, Denise and Paula chips. In a 1989 copy of Electronic Games magazine, Needle is quoted as saying,
"In August of 1987, RJ and I went out to lunch with Dave Morse. We all went down to this little cafe near RJ's place that sits on the side of a lagoon. The scenery was beautiful, the weather was perfect, and half-naked women were all around us. In case you haven't been here, that is the California version of paradise. So during the course of this great meal, we talked about developing an incredible new gaming system. It would be totally portable and unlike anything currently on the market."
Michael adds,
Then I asked the question of the hour, who's going to pay for lunch? Morse said, I'll pick up the tab if you design Handy for me. We agreed to his terms, and that was that. So both of us rushed home, packed our bags, moved into the office, and here we are today.
This is the start then of The Handy, Epyx's codename for their new handheld console. During this lunch, two concepts were actually drafted on literal napkins, the Handy and what would later become the 3DO. Needle quickly got to work on the chipset, and namely two custom chips that he named Susie and Mikey, sticking to the traditions from the Amiga. Mikey was a 16-bit custom CMOS clocked at 16 MHz. It housed an enhanced 6502 CPU running at up to 4 MHz, a 4-channel sound processor with an 8-bit DAC, and the ability to play PSG-style pulse and noises. Alongside this, system timers, an interrupt controller, 512 bytes of bootstrap and game card loading ROM, and a video DMA driver capable of using a 12-bit 4096 palette with up to 16 simultaneous colours. Susie, also a 16-bit custom CMOS, clocked at 16 MHz but incorporating a Blitter graphics engine, hardware sprite drawing with scaling, distortion and tilting, hardware decoding of compression sprite data, unlimited high-speed sprites with hardware collision detection, hardware clipping and multi-directional scrolling, and a maths coprocessor. This would have been incredibly impressive for a home console, let alone a handheld, which can be summarized with one quote.
Our sprite engine, that creates the graphics for the Lynx, is easily 20 to 30 times more powerful than the Amiga sprite engine.
But their choices were also appropriate and measured.
RJ and I developed a sophisticated silicon engine that rapidly updated graphics on the screen, generated incredible 4-channel sound, and did all kinds of incredible stuff. So we had the engine, but we needed something to drive it. So we picked what was clearly the highest performing CPU, Central Processing Unit, in a certain size and price range, and that was the 65CO2.
Some people believe it's less of a processor than the 68000, for example. That series of chip was used in the Amiga, but it wouldn't make our machine do things any better. In fact, it would only make the unit larger and more expensive. It's also harder to write 68000 code, so we definitely made the right decision.
In the prototype, you can see the unmistakable configuration coming together. This then was a machine that was incredibly powerful but also cost efficient. It also meant that less RAM was needed. 1 kilobyte of 6502 code would typically equate to 3K of code on a 68000, and most of that precious 64 kilobytes memory was needed to copy the cartridge ROM to RAM before use. Initial prototypes were built on 4x4 sheets of plywood, covered in chips simulating what the final hardware would do. They even spec'd out features like accelerometer controls, which seems crazy on a 1980s piece of gaming tech. Given the speed at which the Handy needed to be ready, design was done at a lightning pace, but the team quickly found that the screen would be one of the biggest hurdles. Thankfully, the Japanese company Citizen had been creating handheld colour televisions since around 1984. These early panels used screen sizes around 2 inches, but luckily they had also been working on a newer, larger generation. So when the Epyx guys sparked up a conversation, Citizen had a panel that was the perfect size, and even better yet, they hadn't actually designed the handheld television for it to fit into. Purchasing the technology, the Epyx team got to work on integrating the screen.
We actually settled on using 4096 colors because the LCD glass has limitations in its drivers. Dave and I thought about adding more hues to the palette, but that simply wasn't possible.
But they also had to make the screen viewable. Citizen's screen was passive and required backlighting.
Like with the backlight, We knew it was a critical feature because we wanted the biggest and brightest display we could. The reality was that the technology we looked at was so expensive. There were viewing angle problems and hot spots from the light, all kinds of things. Then the magical day came when a guy found the answer and we realized we could have a gorgeous display.
Using a cold cathode fluorescent, combined with diffusers, reflectors and waveguides, they managed to get a colourful and usable image on screen. They now had a viable unit, a unit that was dubbed the Potato due to its size and shape, and work continued in a development area called the Nuclear Toaster that was top secret even for most employees within Epyx. So then, just like the Amiga days, where a revolutionary computer had been funded partly by selling joysticks and gaming peripherals, time was repeating itself at Epyx. But also like Amiga, cash flow issues were rearing their head behind the scenes, and something would soon have to give. During the California cookout, Epyx weren't just toasting to their game's success, they were toasting to their revenue success. That year they had achieved $27 million in revenue, but the problem was that half of their sales came from the Commodore 64, and Freeman knew its days were numbered. Morse was brought on to steer a new direction, with the Potato being the lead project, with estimates of between $4 million and $8 million for its hardware development alone, not even bringing software into account, which could easily double it. Had they focused on that alone, they might have stumbled on through, but they didn't. They also kicked off a line called the Masters Collection, straying from their previous success into RPGs and submarine sims. They delved into creativity software, trying to keep up with Electronic Arts' own range. They also imported European budget action games. All these came with a cost, but at least they were sticking to software and the systems they knew back to front, right? Well, their decision to invest in VCR-based interactive games really sums up the problematic choices Epyx were now making. Yes, we've been there before, it's not pretty. Epyx may not have tried to create a doomed VCR console like others, but they did start producing VCR-based board games including VCR California Games, VCR Top Rank Boxing, and VCR Golf. All these distractions had good intentions to capture different slices of the market and create an even more secure footing for the growing company, but in reality it did the exact opposite. Epyx's total revenue actually climbed from $27 million to $36 million in 1988, but their expenditure was far higher, and that was a problem. A big problem. Epyx couldn't afford to complete the Handy and launch it, so they began looking for someone to fund its development. Their first approach was to Sega. They knew Sega was doing well in Europe and had already had talks about porting California games over to the Master System.
We showed it to Sega and hoped they would buy it instead of them doing what became the Game Gear. If they'd bought the Lynx, I think that could have completely changed everything.
With Sega declining, the legendary video game designer Henk Rogers offered a hand, having connections with Hiroshi Yamauchi at Nintendo. After setting up a meeting, Dave Needle, Dave Morse and Joe Horowitz would find themselves on a flight to Japan, ready to pitch their idea. However, Yamauchi was reportedly unconvinced by battery life and the cost of production. I'm sure the fact that they were already working on their own handheld was also a very strong factor here, but prior to the trip, Epyx were blissfully unaware. Having inadvertently now given their future competition the heads up, they started looking for deals closer to home, now with the Handy in prototype stage. In January 1989 at the Winter CES in Las Vegas, the Handy was demonstrated to industry insiders and reportedly received good feedback. This was an NDA-protected demo to try and find further suitors. But the only company who appeared interested in backing the project was Jack Tramiel's Atari. The same Atari that Dave Morse, Dave Needle and RJ Michael had encountered in their Amiga days and had taken a little bit of a dislike to, mainly due to Atari attempting to sue Amiga and seize the Lorraine chipset. After their somewhat underhand deal with Commodore, This lawsuit wasn't finalised until 1987, and the way Jack Tramiel had conducted negotiations left a very bitter taste in the ex-Amiga team's mouth. And now, here they were with Jack's son, Sam Tramiel, now Atari CEO, trying to hammer out an incredibly bitter-sweet deal. And just like Atari's first deal, it would turn sour very quickly. A year or so prior, Atari had turned down a deal offered by Sega to distribute their new Mega Drive console throughout America, given the Master System hadn't been a great success there. They offered pretty lucrative terms to Atari, but Jack Tramiel was completely against it. Maybe because by his own admission, he despised Japan taking over the American games market. Maybe in part because Sega were a pretty powerful company and Jack preferred to prey on the weak. Who knows? But now, perhaps with the inklings of regret starting to show, they were trying to make this new deal work. Inside Epyx, Chuck Somerville was still working away on software for the Handy and recalls,
Atari was trying really hard to make things right for us. I was very hopeful that things would turn out well, because Epyx had basically run out of development money, and we had few options left.
However, both RJ Michael and Dave Needle had told Morse that if the deal went ahead, they'd walk, leaving the machine they had built with the dwindling team at Epyx under Atari's watchful eye. But with all other options exhausted and time running out, this was it. On the 3rd of June 1989, two initial Atari Epyx licensing agreements were signed, the Hardware Technology Assignment and License Agreement and the Software Production and Distribution License Agreement. But the timing here was extraordinarily tight. This was immediately before the summer CES in Chicago, where the system made its debut as the Atari Portable Entertainment System. Epyx hadn't been sleeping throughout the spring though. The system now looked a lot more like the finished product than a potato. Stylistic choices such as the 3.5-inch 160 by 102 pixel screen, 2 sets of fire buttons for right or left hand play, an 8-direction thumb pad NES style, volume and brightness dials, a mono headphone out, COM Lynx connector, 9V DC in, and the whopping 10.5-inch by 4.5-inch by 1.25-inch size, giving the unmistakable Lynx footprint. But at this point, Epyx still technically owned the console. Atari was simply licensing it. On the 12th of June 1989, the OEM purchase and distribution agreement was signed between the parties, pinning down the OEM manufacturing agreements. On the 21st of June, the manufacturing services agreement was signed and various arrangements were put in place between Epyx and Atari. Epyx now had to meet various milestones in order for Atari to make payments to them. These payments formed the core part of the licensing deal, but meant that Epyx needed to deliver some key milestones going forward. The first of those was getting the console delivered and ready for sale by the 1st of September 1989, the day on which the Atari Lynx was commercially launched in the US. At least this is what most articles on the internet will tell you, and perhaps it was likely the day Atari wanted to launch their new handheld, but it didn't happen. In fact, news sources throughout September and October still refer to the upcoming Atari Lynx, with speculations on when it will be available. What did happen, however, was the console was given its new name, the Atari Lynx, likely due to the fact that the link cable that shipped with the machine was one of its main selling points, pushing this as not only an incredible handheld 16-bit experience, but also one that you could share with your friends.
On some Atari Lynx games, you can link up 4 players, but there's only ever one winner.
Meaning that they absolutely needed to buy one as well. It's also the first in Atari's lineage of naming consoles after big cats, with the unreleased Panther and Jaguar to follow. But let's get back on track. The other thing happening at this time was that Epyx was struggling, really struggling. On the 15th of September 1989, Epyx announced that it would lay off half its staff, with numbers already having dwindled to 40 from 150 just a year prior. This formed part of a new strategy shift from games on computers to games on consoles, The Nintendo Entertainment System had already taken a big chunk of their audience away. However, unwilling to commit to Nintendo's licensing deal, Epyx had shied away from that console and missed the boat. All their remaining energy now was being poured into the Atari Lynx. What's more, Dave Morse had resigned as chief executive, leaving the company in a perilous position. By November, the Atari Lynx was being promoted, it was being talked about, but Atari still hadn't managed to get stock on shelves. They were now promising that units would be available no later than the 18th of November. And this time, they actually delivered. Well, almost. The initial launch was actually in Japan, facilitated by Atari Japan. This is where the units had originally been manufactured before Tramiel pulled manufacture back to the US during September, along with most of the stock, numbering some 500,000 units reportedly. And according to Richard Hilton, communications head between Japan and USA, Japan were left with a fraction of this stock. Like the USA, the initial naming announcement had been in September the 6th, but the handheld wasn't launched until the 20th of November, and only available in 20 retailers split between Tokyo and Yokohama. Famitsu magazine actually ran an article the following week covering the new machine and the launch. They spoke to director of Atari's technology division, who did his best to sell their console, despite Nintendo's Game Boy having been released 7 months earlier.
The US price for the Lynx is $149.95. Japan's price has indeed ended up a little on the high side. The distribution structure is different for America, so it can't be helped. We are already in contract negotiations with several companies in America and several in Japan, so by around March of next year, including third-party software, I think we'll be able to supply around 15 to 16 titles.
Famitsu don't hold back from questioning though, even displaying a comparison table between the Lynx and Game Boy, leaving Akubo with some tricky questions.
Maximum playtime with 6 AA alkaline batteries is 4 hours. Because we're using a backlight, this is unavoidably the best performance we can offer.
He also mentions that an AC adapter and Comlinks cable would be released alongside the system, along with future accessories including a wireless joystick and a waterproof and dustproof Lynx that could be played at the beach. This is in contrast to Atari USA, who opted to include the adapter and Comlinks with every console in order to boost sales. However, this is also where a problem had developed. The USA launch was the very next day, the 21st of November 1989, with a press release selling its benefits. As discussed in Atari's own marketing materials, they went all out, at least they went all out in New York, the only area to receive any stock at this point. This is Sam and Leonard Tramiel watching the first adverts for the Lynx go out over Times Square from the hotel where the launch occurred. This message would be flashed once every 2 minutes for 2 weeks. Limited stock was then ushered into retailers such as FAO Schwarz, before the Thanksgiving parade 2 days later on the 23rd of November. But we don't have records of any consoles being sold until Black Friday, the 24th of November 1989, where the marketing materials state: the day after Thanksgiving, major toy outlets like FAO Schwarz in New York City enjoyed a brisk business in all departments. 2 days after stocking its shelves with Lynx, Atari's portable color video game system, Schwarz had sold out of their initial supply. Consumers found the smooth graphics, vivid colors, and excellent sound to be an ideal holiday gift. We don't really know how many machines were available at this point, but we can derive that it was a very limited amount. Atari's own material states: to help FAO Schwarz meet the consumer demand, members of Atari management hand-delivered a dozen systems and Electro-Cop game cartridges for the first full weekend of sales. A dozen. 12. 12 systems for an entire weekend of sales. Well, those noble souls. This festive season was absolutely key for the Lynx to succeed. Atari had told outlets that fewer than 70,000 Lynx systems would be available before Christmas, but this already low number feels exaggerated. A ghost from a company trying to desperately keep up with Nintendo, shipping 1.1 million Game Boys for the same period, and still only meeting half their demand. Newspapers quickly reported on the new console arrival, next to auction houses trying to sell off parts of the Berlin Wall. Reviews were coming in for the Lynx and praising it left, right and centre, with lines like Atari zapped Nintendo and Atari's compact high-performance game system caught Nintendo totally by surprise, not uncommon. But Dave Wilson, computer buff, knew the score, stating, "The Atari Lynx is the pick of the 90s. The only problem is that it may not be available in large numbers by Christmas. Atari has never been good at getting things into stores when it promises." There were also adverts in all the local press, how to make points with your son, stating the console was available at Toys R Us, Babbage's, KB Toy Stores, Lionel Kiddie City, Child World, FAO Schwartz, Ward's and Circus World. But everywhere people were reporting that it was impossible to get hold of a Lynx before Christmas. Atari's biggest market had just gone out and bought Nintendo's Game Boy. And the rest of them? Well, they'd caught wind of this powerhouse Japanese console called the Mega Drive.
Visual shock, speed shock, sound shock.
時代が求めた16ビットセガメガドライブ
Remember Epyx? Sure you do, they're the ones who built this machine. They were also the ones now directly in Atari's firing line. You see, Atari weren't happy with the Christmas 1989 sales, or lack of sales. The New York and Tokyo launches were mainly so that Sam Trammell could write things to keep investors happy in the quarterly and annual reports.
Lynx was recognized as a revolutionary achievement by the trade when it was first introduced at the Consumer Electronics Show in Chicago last summer. Shipments began just prior to Christmas in New York City and Tokyo, and these two test markets were sold out.
With a small footnote mentioning
constraints in availability and their release so late in the year resulted in a limited launch campaign.
But really they knew that the ball had been fumbled here, and they blamed Epyx for the fact that the full nationwide launches in their two key markets couldn't go ahead. Poor old Epyx. You see, Epyx had to hit those contractual milestones in order to receive payment. In a Now Gamer interview, Dave Needle describes a 60-day software bug fix clause, but the rumours column suggests that a missed cable delivery was the breach trigger, the cable in question being the COM Lynx cable, a cable that was bundled with the initial US release alongside an AC adapter and Epyx's conversion of California games. This needed to work. The hardware needed to work. When Atari USA repatriated manufacturing from Japan to the US, they left Japan without this cable, and so initial Japanese bundles didn't include it, or an AC adapter, or a game for that matter, although they did toss in 6 AA batteries that were needed to power it, which of course we'll come back to. With Atari withholding a crucial $2 million payment from Epyx, it's reported that Epyx filed for bankruptcy before the end of 1989. Shortly thereafter, on the 5th of January 1990, a license funding and sale agreement was drawn up between Atari and Epyx, and the Atari Lynx fully became Atari's property. As part of this agreement, Atari actually paid the owed milestone money to Epyx and an additional amount to cover royalty rights. And this seemingly saved Epyx, in a sort of kind of way anyway, and allowed them to limp on with game development and come out of bankruptcy, but now exclusively for the Atari Lynx. Just like his father's Amiga deal, Sam Trammell had seemingly lined things up so Atari could claim full ownership, leaving Epyx in their wake.
Software support for the new Lynx has been equally impressive. In less than 4 months, 6 top game titles were released. I'm pleased to say that our video game software group is currently producing exciting titles, which includes some arcade hits. As many as 25 new games are planned for release by Christmas, and new hardware peripherals are presently under development.
Interestingly, although the carts don't have a little protective case themselves, they do fit absolutely perfectly into a Game Boy case. Coincidence? Probably not.
On the 6th of January, one day after their sale agreement with Epyx, Atari found themselves at the Winter CES. They might not have planned to, but Epyx had already paid for a 20-foot booth in the West Main Hall, and so Atari now took it. This last-minute display consisted of partially clothed women on roller skates, a small sailboat background, and various Lynx consoles set up with California games. This would be fantastic had the rest of the show not been absolutely jam-packed with Nintendo Game Boys, accessories for the Game Boy, and developers for the Game Boy. Perhaps to shift the focus away from this, Atari invited press to the Mirage Hotel where the real Atari display was. This display is where they unveiled the Atari Power Pack, the infamous Atari ST bundle that included so many games that it stopped buyers from buying any more. Alongside that was the Atari portfolio, the classic 2600 still limping along, and of course, the Lynx.
And something new from Atari, the folks who started the video game craze. Lynx, the next wave in portable handheld video games. It's nearly twice as expensive as Nintendo's Game Boy, but the Lynx has full-color graphics and 4-channel sound. This is Herb Weisbaum reporting.
Now, you might be branded cynical if you realise that the day after obtaining full rights from Epyx is the day when the Lynx really started to appear in retailers in high numbers. But this is what happened. Priced at a quite hefty $179.95, this was $90 more than the Game Boy and $80 more than Epyx had originally hoped to price the machine. At this point, all the developed games were also created by Epyx. California Games, Blue Lightning, The Gates of Zendocon, Electrocop, and Chips Challenge, with prices ranging from $34.99 to $39.99. This might have been more had a big chunk of developers not refused to engage with Atari over unpaid debts from prior years, and the other chunk already sworn allegiance to Nintendo. Which was a shame, because the Lynx dev kit was pretty damn good. Based around the Commodore Amiga with a Howard board, it let coders peek into running hardware in real time, miles ahead of anything else and worthy of a separate video entirely. In contrast, the Game Boy had 10 to 15 titles, including the very recognisable Super Mario Land, the absolute perfection of handheld gaming, Tetris, Castlevania, and Final Fantasy Legend, to name a few. These titles were all cheaper, around $25, and the library was growing at a much faster rate than the Lynx. Still, Lynx games did come, some more notable than others. And as ownership grew, reviews also started to come, again, some more notable than others. But Sega had been working hard on their own colour handheld, and it was almost ready. On the 6th of October 1990, the Game Gear was launched in Japan. This was the first colour competitor to the Lynx, and it landed at 10,000 yen less than the Lynx. The Game Gear sold 40,000 units in its first 2 days, 90,000 in its first month, and racked up over 600,000 back orders. Plus, NEC's PC Engine GT was just around the corner. What's more, both Nintendo and Sega were using sneaky tactics with retailers, with reports that both were telling shops that they couldn't stock their respective consoles if they also stocked Atari's Lynx, leaving the 16-bit American handheld relegated to the bottom corner shelf, or even worse, the back storage rooms.
It's going to be about $140, and its main difference, again, it has cartridges, but it also is in color. In color? Wow.
Yes. Still, Christmas 1990 would surely make up for things.
Rampage, or games that arcade players are familiar with, they're going to be available on the Lynx.
Viewers, it did not. And to help understand why, Atari themselves offered some insights from their own perspective.
As a result of the release of only 12 titles during 1990 and the higher launch price, sales of the Lynx were slow.
That's what Sam Trammell said in the President's letter of the 1990 annual report. By this point, the Game Boy had around 70 titles. And Atari had to fight harder, but their costs were increasing left, right and centre.
Marketing and distribution expenses increased $5.6 million in 1990 compared to 1989, principally due to the effects of changes in exchange rates during 1990 compared to 1989.
And Atari had issues with their marketing expenses, meaning that Christmas 1990, although certainly better than their previous year, was still not ideal. Reports from the time put total Lynx sales throughout 1990 at 500,000. Their operating income of $3.7 million in 1989 turned to a loss of $25.2 million in 1990, with computers still making up most of that income at 79%, compared to video games, including the Lynx, in total at 21%. But let's remember that most of Atari's computer sales were outside of North America. In fact, 89% of their sales were outside North America, with most of them attributed to Europe, where machines like the ST were proving pretty successful in the home computer market. That was also a market that wasn't totally dominated by Nintendo, at least not Nintendo's entertainment system. Perhaps the Lynx would slot in here a little bit better than North America and Japan. The Lynx actually landed in the UK and Europe before Christmas 1990, but due to further launch botchery, this was after the Game Boy landed on the 28th of September 1990. In fact, it landed a month later, and because of that they failed again to get the head start they needed. But at least they now had a market and a console primed for its first Christmas. As you may expect, the UK launch was much more of a UK affair, exemplified by the Atari Computer whistle-stop tour from the 23rd to the 29th of October. Imagine for a second, filling a train with Atari systems alongside Chesney Hawks and then sending it to Manchester, Newcastle, Birmingham, Glasgow, Bristol and Leeds. Because that's what happened. And you could win a piece of kit by simply answering a couple of questions on the back of a sealed envelope and sending it in. The first prize was an ST Discovery Pack, with 4 second prize winners receiving an Atari Lynx handheld video game system, the #1 stocking filler for Christmas this year. Stocking filler? Firstly, have you seen the size of the damn thing? Don't be fooled by Tobey Maguire's alarmingly deep denim jacket pocket. Secondly, a stocking filler? How flipping rich were your parents? This would have been the main prize, and then some for most people.
Introducing Lynx from Atari, the color video game you can get away with. Well, sometimes.
Anyway, clearly it didn't work as well as hoped, because by December 1990, Lynxes were on sale for £129.99, a £50 reduction from its initial price. That's quite a steep drop in 2 months, and this was pretty much the same story across the rest of Europe.
It's interesting how different regions came up with different gimmicks to shift this console. For example, over in France, each game came with a little metal pin badge that you could collect and presumably trade with your Lynx-owning friends, if you could find any of those. Still, pretty cool.
As 1991 thrust into view, Atari attended another winter CES in Las Vegas and came armed with the same strategy: pricing. You could now get a hefty Lynx for a not so hefty price tag of $99. Atari also committed to releasing over 40 titles, which was really needed after 1990. But don't be fooled immediately. The new $99 price got you the console only, just like Japan. If you wanted the full retail bundle, then slap another $30 on. This price was certainly welcome, but it was still more than the Game Boy. But you see, the Game Boy wasn't the only problem here. The lack of appealing game titles wasn't the only problem here. The gigantic size and weight of the thing wasn't the only problem here. The miserable couple of hours of battery life compared to 10 times the amount on the Game Boy wasn't the only problem here, and trust me, 90s batteries could only do the advertised 4 hours if you bought the most expensive home-wrecking brands available. Don't even get me started on rechargeable batteries from that era. In fact, that's why you could purchase this accessory. This was essentially a power bank running on C-cell batteries, or D-cell batteries, Big batteries, just what you want to carry around alongside a cheeseboard-sized slab of a console.
Now for the results of our battery test. The winner is the Game Boy. It worked out in about 20 hours. About 80 an hour. The Lynx, £2 an hour. And double that for the Game Gear, an astonishing £4 an hour.
Well, at least it was beating the Game Gear in some aspects. Anyway, the lack of stereo sound out wasn't the only problem here. The outrageous upsetting motion blur of the screen wasn't the only problem here. The fact that in April 91, Sega's Game Gear landed with a retail price of £99 or $149 and started competing directly in Atari's colour, grown-up, powerful handheld space, but with more game grunt and a bigger following, wasn't the only problem here. But at least Atari would attempt to fix at least 3 of those problems this year, and maybe win back support. Because let's not forget that despite these issues, the Lynx was a whole generation of handheld ahead of its time here. When paired with a genuinely good game, which, true to Atari's word, we saw more of during 1991, it was an incredible experience that in some cases could mimic the arcade. It could do things that even Sega's new Mega Drive console couldn't do. And Atari knew that, so they felt that maybe the smaller Lynx 2 could help convince folks to buy one. The Lynx 2 was smaller, lighter, had a slightly longer battery life thanks to mostly to a screen where you could turn the battery hogging backlight off. It had a less tinny speaker, a power LED, stereo headphone output, a better grip and a more reasonable price point. Andy Markin, head of PR firm Markin Communications, was in charge of promotion over in North America. He'd actually been behind the first Lynx's marketing too, and he'd worked with Atari since 1986, but Sam Trammell routinely sacked him and brought him back on board. In a memoir from 2013, he recounts the launch.
Just before the following Thanksgiving, we introduced the Lynx 2 that had a better feel, way of handling cartridges, battery life, and a lower price. We showed it off at the Marriott Marquis in New York City, overlooking the Times Square digital sign we rented for the occasion. While a young lady on our team trudged through the slush delivering seed review systems to radio, TV, and print folks, Sam, other team members, and I had back-to-back interviews. Most reviewers wouldn't let the new Lynx go, so Sam was happy to offer them a special editorial discount and have the unit overnighted to them. Suffice to say, everyone was happy, except the gal with the wet, cold feet.
Markin's recount puts the Lynx 2 launch around October-November, which is corroborated with when advertising for the console starts appearing in media at the time, although just like the first console, it was announced earlier in the year in a bid to try and compete with Sega's new offering. Just like Clive Sinclair, Atari seemed good at announcing things without delivering the goods. With a UK retail of £99 and a matching US retail of $99 bare bones, this model was pitched to sell, but just like the first, we quickly see retailers cutting the price for the Christmas '91 season. To understand what impact the Lynx 2 had, we really need to look at Sam Trammell's words again in their annual report.
As I noted in my message last year, we reduced the retail price of the Lynx to $99. As anticipated, unit sales increased over 1990 by 80%. This increase, together with the 42 software titles now available, is positioning this product as a major contender in the portable category. For the upcoming Christmas market, we will have about 75 titles. In a number of countries throughout Europe and in the US, we introduced new advertisements and TV commercials during the fourth quarter. These new consumer messages proved successful and will be carried forward into 1992. Our software development continues to be strong, and we are licensing some major titles, such as Batman Returns.
An increase in over 80% is not to be sniffed at, and it certainly put the Lynx in a new light. Most of these sales we can attribute to the price drops of the original model and the excitement over the new. If you could find an original model, they were now even cheaper. Trade press reports in late '91 estimate that the Lynx had sold 800,000 units, which Atari claimed was in projections. However, when talking about the company as a whole, Trammell is less enthused.
After lengthy consideration, I decided to present this year's message to you in a direct, straightforward way. I am quite displeased with the company's 1991 results and hope that this message accurately conveys my dissatisfaction and the corrective actions we have implemented. My desk is where the buck stops.
Although on paper, 91 had a net income of $25.6 million, this was mostly due to the sale of their Taiwanese manufacturing facility for $40.9 million. If you take that out and look at their operating income, we get a loss of $18.7 million. It's clear Atari were now struggling, whilst their main competition was going from strength to strength. 1992 starts with yet another winter CES. The Lynx 2 is now on the stand, it now has around 50 games, and the year is looking rosy for it. Apart from the fact that it's not. Sam Trammell and Atari have a lot on their plate. Chief amongst these are his father's management methods catching up with him. Back in 1987, Atari acquired the consumer electronics retailer Federated Group and never really knew what to do with it.
Did you feel that? Fine, Billy.
On the 23rd of January 92, an involuntary petition lands on their doorstep. The bankruptcy is separate to Atari Corp itself, but still has an impact. In 1989, Atari had filed an antitrust case against Nintendo, on the basis that Nintendo illegally restrained and monopolized the markets for home video consoles, something Sam Trammell would often reference.
We were the leader in the first wave of video games. The next wave, the winner was Nintendo. They were clearly the winner, using monopolistic practices, but they were the winner. The third one was Sega.
And had poured years of management time into it. In February 92, the case would come to court, and by April, Atari had lost. In essence, this was in part why the Lynx had suffered. Nintendo had tied most of the Japanese publishers into exclusivity arrangements. Sega mopped up the rest, and Atari were left by themselves. If only they'd signed that Atari Mega Drive deal.
Anybody want to play this one over here?
Somebody?
Just a few hands up there.
On the 4th of March, a Texas jury awarded $2.245 million against Atari and Federated in Scott Campbell versus Atari, an emotional distress claim from a former employee. It was covered by insurance, but yet another management distraction. In the second quarter of 92, Atari took a $22.8 million inventory write-down for older ST stock, their 2600 consoles, basically anything that wasn't forward-looking, like Lynx, their brand new and powerful computer in development known as the Falcon, and their new in-development console, the Atari Jaguar. On the 19th of June, Tim Burton's Batman sequel premieres, Batman Returns, and for once Atari has timed things perfectly. Their software division had been hard at work on the Atari Lynx movie tie-in, and it was ready to release alongside the film. In celebration, they also launched a Batman Returns Atari Lynx 2 bundle. This is the closest thing the Lynx had come to for a big-name, mass-market tentpole release, and Sam Trammell was placing a lot of his hopes on it. As movies did back then, Batman Returns hit UK cinemas a month later, on the 10th of July. Darryl Still, Atari's UK marketing manager, is quoted in Retro Gamer issue 129 for their Lynx 25th anniversary feature.
Coming to a screen near you in over 4,000 colors with full stereo sound.
I remember going to the movie premiere in Leicester Square and hobnobbing with the likes of Bob Geldof and Paulie Yates and Catherine Zeta-Jones and John Leslie on the red carpet. The big issue with the advert was that it was all gameplay, and when it appeared on the big screen, the pixelation was somewhat extreme.
And we're not talking a 30-second advert spot here. This was 15 minutes long. 15 minutes of Lynx Batman footage. Atari had almost got it right, but a 160 by 102 pixel handheld on a massive cinema screen meant that each pixel was the size of a human head, and that probably didn't come across as they might have hoped. Still, a media marketing campaign followed, and it looked like the Lynx 2 might finally be making progress. But Atari were again about to shift their focus entirely.
And now this is the fourth generation, 32 and 64-bit machines. And the Atari being 64 bits and being very affordable at 159, we think will be the next generation winner in the marketplace.
Before the end of the year, Atari would take another inventory write-down, this time for $14.1 million, as they prepared to exit the 8-bit market altogether and write off their ST range, a computer that only a couple of years prior had been their headline sales figure. In his 1992 letter to shareholders, Tramel's bleakness from the prior year continued, as his signature became smaller and smaller on the annual report.
As you will read in the accompanying 10K report, Atari is still going through a difficult time. Sales are down significantly, and a large loss was incurred in 1992.
But ended with an optimistic angle.
1993 will be a challenging year. With the launch of the Atari Falcon 030 and the future introduction of the Jaguar, we plan to rebuild our sales and bring Atari back to profit.
You might be forgiven for noticing a lack of commentary around the Lynx in the 1992 annual report, and that's because despite the Batman Returns pack, it was still dwindling. All their energy was now being focused into the upcoming Jaguar console, but Lynx-compatible features had been left dormant. The Jaguar includes a Comlinks line on its main board, a connector that was reported to allow communication between the Lynx and the console, including rumours of using the handheld as a motion tracker for the upcoming Alien-based game. An incredibly cool feature that would have been ahead of systems like the Wii U, which at this point weren't even in anyone's wildest thoughts and dreams. The Lynx went from a product Atari was selling to a product they were now clearing. This is obviously put in the 1993 letter to shareholders.
In the third and fourth quarters of 1993, the company wrote down inventories by $7.5 million and $10.6 million respectively. These were write-offs of older 16-bit and below personal computers and 8-bit video game products, and write-downs of Lynx and Falcon products to estimated realizable value, and were made concurrently with the introduction and change in marketing focus to the company's new Jaguar product line.
In fact, reports from this point onwards had the Atari Jaguar logo now emblazoned across the front. The focus was now firmly on the Jaguar. In fact, the entire company was riding on the Atari Jaguar, being successful. And we all know how that went. If you don't, you can watch my video on it. By the end of '93, the company was fundamentally a smaller business. Offices had been closed in France, Germany, Spain, Italy, Sweden, Switzerland, Canada, Mexico, Japan, Australia, and everything was condensed and downsized everywhere else. In an executive survey, Sam Trammell was also stated as being the lowest paid CEO in the United States. The drive was there, but the problem needed more than penny pinching. This was also the year that the remaining shell of Epyx was sold off to Bridgestone Media Group, bringing a close to the console's original home.
Atari clearly had stock to clear because they also started pushing bundles like the Family Pack that included 2 games, a Batman cap, and this hefty carry case with space for all your games, if you had that many.
The final hurrah for the Lynx was the Maximum Pack, a console bundled with 4 games that cleared out the remaining stock whilst the Jaguar died in the background. Still, we did get some releases. Let's have a cheer and a moment for them, because now companies like Telegames were doing the publishing. Atari had very much taken a back seat.
In order to ensure the long-term success of Jaguar, we need to raise capital. As part of this process, we sold an additional 1.5 million shares to Time Warner Incorporated for a total of 12.8 million.
By the end of 1994, remaining Lynx Batman Returns bundles were being cleared for as low as £29.99 in the UK. America had long since given up. This is the same time that Atari were optimistically trying to raise new capital to soldier forward with the Jaguar, which itself was already seeing price drops. And although production had ended much earlier, 1995 marks the year that the Lynx is officially discontinued, with Atari's final published games being Battlezone 2000 and Super Asteroids / Missile Command. Lifetime sales are estimated to be between 2 and 3 million units. If you compare that to the Game Boy and even Game Gear, you can see the difference. We're talking 2% of the Game Boy's lifetime install base. By '96, Atari ceases all internal development, and on the 30th of July 96, Atari merges with JTS Corporation, which it sold off in 1998 for $5 million. Still, Telegames remained faithful to the core and did continue to release titles. In fact, they bought up most of that Atari surplus stock and continued to run advertisements for games and refurbished Lynx systems at massively discounted prices. But the dream was over. What started as an incredibly powerful and impressive platform that should have made waves ultimately didn't. Atari's missteps, coupled with real-world issues like battery life, cost and game selection, meant the Lynx just couldn't make it. Nintendo wouldn't even touch on the power the Lynx had until the Game Boy Advance came out in 2001, over a decade later.
Game Boy Advance, console quality gaming anywhere.
But for those of us who owned a Lynx, for those of us who got to experience the arcade feeling of Zybots back in 1991, we knew what we had.
There were 71 officially published games for the Lynx in total. As you may expect, some of these are now incredibly rare and worth a small fortune. This is particularly true of the later titles, as the user base dwindled and the console found itself repeatedly in the second-hand pages, usually with a set of games already, which presumably kept the new buyer pretty occupied. Thankfully, like a lot of these underappreciated systems, today there's a thriving homebrew scene with a plethora of games, accessories, and mods still being developed for this undernourished console. I've linked some key sites and threads below that are definitely worth looking at. This Lynx 2, for example, has the McWill mod, which improves the screen no end, and on this example integrates a VGA out. Very useful for making videos like this. And talking of videos like this, they wouldn't be possible without all the archivists, collectors, and webmasters who have been uploading documentation, interviews, ROMs, and forgotten content for years. These heroes often go unspoken, but I've linked as much as I can below this video, and there's a full text-based version on my website that includes as many references and sources as possible. You know, these system stories are a labour of research, collating, reviewing, and love, but they do tend to wipe me out for a while afterwards. So as ever, thank you to everyone who supports my channel through Patreon or just by clicking subscribe and the notification bell. Such a classic. I'll be back with another system story in due course. Until then, please let me know if there's any machine in particular you'd like to see in the comments, on my Discord server, Blue Sky, or Instagram. Apologies if I don't respond to you in a timely fashion. It's nothing personal, it's just your basic internet overwhelm. Until next time, I've been Nostalgia Nerd. Toodaloo.